Right now, just before dark, the geese on the pond at the edge of your town are doing something almost nobody has ever watched. All day they graze the field, loud, obvious, impossible to ignore. Then the light drops, and they change completely. Tonight, while you sleep, some of those geese will rest with half their brain awake and one eye open. Some will stand on bare ice for hours without their feet ever freezing, and some will lift off in total darkness and fly for hours directly above your roof. Stay to the end, because the last thing they do happens over your house, and almost no one ever looks up. Watch a flock of geese at the end of any winter afternoon, and you'll notice the moment it happens. The grazing slows. The honking changes pitch, shorter, sharper, more frequent. Heads come up, and then, almost as one body, the flock lifts off the field and climbs into the fading light, beating hard, calling constantly, pointed somewhere you can't see. They are not wandering. They are commuting. Geese live a double life split across two completely different places. A daytime place to eat and a nighttime place to sleep. And the flight between them happens at almost exactly the same time every evening, tied to the angle of the sun. The eating place is the field, you see. Stubble, lawns, winter wheat, anywhere with open grass and a clear line of sight. The sleeping place is water, almost always open water, a lake, a reservoir, a wide, slow river, a flooded gravel pit, a retention pond behind a shopping center. As the light goes, geese leave the land and go to the water, and they do it because water is the safest bed a goose can find. Think about what hunts a goose. Foxes, coyotes, raccoons, dogs, animals that move on four legs across the ground. None of them can walk up on a goose sleeping in the middle of a lake. Water is a moat. A goose resting 50 yards from shore has bought itself something priceless in the dark. Distance, and a surface that betrays anything trying to cross it. A swimming predator pushes a wake. A wading one sends ripples and sound across the surface long before it arrives. So the geese float out past the reach of the bank, turn into the wind, and let the water do the watching for them. And they don't do it alone or scattered. They gather. Geese that grazed in small family groups across different fields all day converge on the same water at night. Sometimes hundreds of them, sometimes thousands, all packed onto one body of water in a loose, floating raft. There's hard math behind that crowd, and it sets up the first thing most people get completely wrong about a sleeping goose. Because a goose in that raft is not nearly as asleep as it looks. Here is what's actually happening on that dark water. A goose does not switch off the way you do. It runs a system biologists call unihemispheric slow-wave sleep. Sleep in half the brain at a time. One hemisphere drops into deep rest, while the other stays online. And the eye connected to the waking half stays open, watching. The two halves trade off through the night, so the whole brain eventually gets its rest. But the bird, is never fully unconscious the way a sleeping mammal is. Now scale that up to the raft. The geese, on the outer edge of the group, the ones facing open water and the dangerous shoreline, sleep with the outward eye open and the alert hemisphere pointed at the threat. The geese, tucked safely in the center, can afford to close both eyes and sleep deeply. Researchers first documented this edge versus center pattern in birds resting in rows and found the effect was deliberate. Birds on the exposed end kept the outward eye open far more than birds in protected positions, and would even turn around to rest the other half of the brain while keeping watch in the new direction. The flock, in other words, is running a perimeter. The vulnerable positions are doing the watching, the safe positions are doing the sleeping, and every bird takes a turn. On top of that, the most exposed birds often stay fully awake as sentinels, heads up, necks tall, scanning. while the rest. It is a guard rotation, posted and maintained all night without a word of organization you could recognize. This is why you almost never sneak up on a roosting flock. By the time you've registered the dark shapes on the water, dozens of half-asleep brains have already registered you, and a single low warning note can bring the entire raft from rest to airborne in seconds. And the warning travels even when you hear nothing, because the water itself is part of the alarm system. Every goose is feeling the surface as much as watching it, and the smallest wrong ripple moves through the raft like a current. They are not just sleeping out there. They are listening with their whole bodies, which raises the obvious question: how does a bird sleep on freezing water all night and not die of the cold? The answer is in the feet, and it's one of the strangest pieces of plumbing in the animal world. A goose standing on ice or floating in near-freezing water should be hemorrhaging body heat through its bare legs every second. It isn't because of a heat exchanger built into those legs called rete mirabile, a wonderful net of blood vessels where warm arteries running down toward the feet are bundled tightly against cold veins running back up. The outgoing warm blood hands its heat to the returning cold blood before it ever reaches the foot. So the warmth stays in the body and the feet are allowed to ride cold, sometimes within a degree or two of freezing, without harm. The foot doesn't need to be warm. It only needs to not freeze, and it doesn't, because there's barely any heat left in it to lose, and almost no fluid that would turn to ice. That single adaptation is why a goose can stand on a frozen lake all night or float in slush while you couldn't keep your bare hand in that water for 60 seconds. And it changes what the roost can be, because the geese aren't limited to warm shelter. They can use the most open, most exposed, most predator-proof water available, the middle of a half-frozen reservoir, and treat the cold as a non-issue. That's how the giant communal roosts form. On big waters in winter, single roosts can hold tens of thousands of geese, all riding the cold together. And those numbers do more than crowd a predator out. They move information. Geese keep up a low, near-constant murmur through the night, soft contact calls passed between birds, almost conversational, nothing like the loud honking of the day. That murmur is the flock taking attendance in the dark, each bird's call telling the others where it is and that all is well. When the calls change, when they sharpen and spread, every goose on that water knows something has shifted before a single one can see why. And tucked inside that calm, talking, freezing-footed raft is a fact about geese that almost nobody believes until they've heard it for themselves. Some of these birds are not going to spend the night on the water at all, because not every goose on that roost is staying. On the right nights, some of them are leaving, and they leave in the dark, on purpose. We think of geese as daytime flyers, those loud V formations crossing an afternoon sky, but geese are powerful nocturnal migrants, and on clear nights during spring and fall passage, flocks lift off the roost well after sunset and fly through the night, navigating by the stars and by the Earth's magnetic field, holding formation in air so dark they can barely see the bird beside them. They stay together by sound. That's what the honking at night is for. The calls that drift down to you from an invisible sky at 2 a.m. are a formation talking itself through the dark, each bird calling its position so the V doesn't come apart. Here's the part that genuinely stuns people the first time they learn it. Those night-migrating geese routinely fly higher than you would ever guess, thousands of feet up in the cold, thin air above the weather, where the ride is smooth and the cold keeps their hard-working muscles from overheating. Flocks have been recorded migrating at altitudes that put them level with mountain peaks and passing aircraft. The goose that grazed a soccer field this afternoon may, by midnight, be a mile above your house, in air too thin and too cold for you to survive, calling steadily to the birds around it. And that brings us to the thing that happens directly over your roof, the part you've been waiting for. Step outside on a clear night during peak migration in spring or fall and stand still in the dark. You won't see them at first, then, faint and high and coming from nowhere you can point to, you'll hear it, honking, drifting down out of the black sky, moving steadily across the stars. That sound is an entire flock, sometimes flock after flock after flock, crossing over your house in the dark, on the same ancient path their ancestors have flown for thousands of years, navigating by lights you cannot see and a magnetic sense you do not have, flying through a night you assumed belonged to owls. They were on the water at dusk. They were freezing-footed and half asleep with one eye open by 10. And by the small hours, some of them are 1,000 feet above your roof, calling their way north. The field goes empty at sunset, and you think the geese have settled in for the night. They haven't settled. They've moved into the part of their lives you were never able to see. And now you know it's happening right over your head on the next clear night you bother to step outside and listen. So tell me in the comments, have you ever heard geese honking high overhead in the middle of the night, somewhere out in the dark, where you couldn't see a single one? I want to hear it. I read every one. I'll see you in the next one.